Professional development for all ranges of experience. Come on in, grab a seat. I'm going to do a quick introduction. My name is Molly Connolly. I am a FileMaker developer like you guys. I've been a professional FileMaker developer since 1997. Used FileMaker starting in college, so way back, 1989. And my company is Thorson Consulting. So I do all custom database consulting. I work with a group of partners to deliver a variety of solutions. Another thing that I've done in recent years is I have an online training program to onboard junior developers. And so I think about professional development a lot, not just for myself, because as a small business owner, you want to stay at the top of your game, and it's hard to do when you're juggling a lot of things. But as I'm trying to teach new people who maybe know nothing about FileMaker, what's important? What do we need to get started with? What do you need to do to be successful? It kind of helps me think about that balance for myself as well. If I can do a real quick poll, how many people are in-house? Okay, and keep your hand up if you're managing a team, working with a team. Okay, so a lot of people are responsible for other development as well. And then of independent people, right? And how many of you have team members that you might be managing and thinking about their professional development? All right, great. We're going to kind of center on an individual plan, but then I think you can use that to extend it to the people you work with. Because I want you to have a framework that you walk away from here with to say, hey, here's how we can achieve it. I just went back to this slide because my initial thought when I was practicing, I was going to give you this kind of inspirational talk about professional development or just learning in general. And I had this great story about my daughter learning how to swim. And then when I was in the keynote this morning, and we were talking, the guy was talking about creativity, and everybody related to that, and everybody related to progress. And I thought, geez, everyone here is at DevCon, and everyone's here at my professional development session, so I don't think I need to sell you on the value of learning. And I think the bigger issue that the focus of my talk is on is like, how do you pick? How do you make the time for it? And how do you make effective use of those resources? How many people have come to DevCon before and been just like, your mind's blown, you're super excited, you're like, I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna learn that, and then you don't have any time at all. Okay, so on the one hand, it's great to come here and be inspired, but my most successful DevCon experiences are when I set goals coming out of DevCon of what I'm gonna achieve, that I actually follow up on. Right, if I come in and I just absorb it, I do go back very easily, go back to my desk, and just get absorbed in day-to-day life. So I wanna give you some tools to try and mitigate that. And again, I'm hoping, we've got 45 minutes. As I'm giving you some ideas, I hope that you'll kind of jot things down. And maybe you walk out of this room and say, you know what, by the end of the week, this is my plan. This is what I'm going to work on individually, and this is how I'm going to execute with my team. So the first thing is to set achievable goals, right? And a couple things in there. Years ago, I managed a team of 11 developers. And my partners and I were like, okay, we're going to have, we read something, and we're going to have a business meeting, and we're going to set some goals. And we sat down and we said, hey, I think what we're gonna do in the next 5 years, we're gonna double the number of employees, right? We were at 20, we were gonna go to 40. We're gonna open a new office, and we're gonna increase our profitability by like 15%. And we kind of laughed, right? We're like, that's crazy, how are we gonna do that? But what happened is we ended up setting goals to achieve that goal, and 3 years later, we achieved the goal. And so that, for me, was one of those things where it's like, you really do need to put a marker in the sand and say, here's what I'm going to do. And you can do it in small increments, or you can do it in big increments. But either way, if you don't set a goal, it's most likely not going to happen. So I'd like everyone to think a little bit about what your goals are for you, for your team. What are those priorities? Right, there's a lot of them on here, and I'll tell you what, mine have shifted over time. Right, when I was 25, and I first left my 80-hour-a-week job at Ernst & Young, said, oh, I'm going to be a FileMaker developer. I wasn't too worried. I just mostly cared about time, right? I wanted to play beach volleyball. I wanted to rest a little bit. I wanted to try new things. I volunteered a lot. And so I didn't have the same constraints. So I could, and this was very early in my FileMaker career, I could stay up till midnight trying to figure out portals, right? I could spend the weekend reading like Scriptology, right? Does anybody remember that book? And so I had time to just go after the things I was excited about and absorb them because, and I only needed about $18,000 a year to live on. It's a little different situation for me now, right? I have kids, I have a mortgage. I like to eat things besides beans and rice. And so now I need to be a lot more deliberate about my learning, right? And I can't just Man, last night at the keynote, did anybody sit there and go, oh, I want to learn that, and what's that, and I want to learn that, and I want to learn that? And I used to kind of just be able to scattershot and see like, oh, I'll try this, see if I'm good at it. I'll try this, see if I'm good at it. I don't really have that opportunity anymore. And I'm assuming if you're in this room, you probably have the same thing. You need some directed path of learning. First thing, what are your goals? You know, do you need more time? Does your business need to make more money? Are you concerned about the quality of your services? I've been through that before, where it's just like I'm behind on the learning curve. I'm not able to monitor what my team is doing. And even though I'm delivering, I'm not doing it to the level I want to, right? I know, and I'll do this a lot. Now, I don't program as much now, right? I've got a team maybe 4 or 5 hours a week. And so I know there's a better way to solve that problem. Probably somebody on my team can do it better. But you know what, this is how I've always done it, so I'll just do that, and it plugs the hole. And that's fine, but a lot of times you say, I want to do the best job I can, right? I don't want to use repeating fields anymore, right? We got to move on. The other thing is less stress. If you have a higher level of competence, it's less stressful, right? You can do your work faster, you can be more efficient, and obviously to eliminate mistakes. So anyway, these are some ideas that's like, what are you trying to achieve? Figure out what you want to achieve first, and then we're going to prioritize your opportunities. What are the things you need to know? For your organization, for your business, for the type of work you're doing, what do you really need to know? My team, I don't need web skills. I finally decided, like I kept trying to learn these web technologies and I was just frankly, I just couldn't wrap my head around it in the same way I can with FileMaker. So I outsource it. I got guys who are great at web development, and so I'm not spending time on that. I'm not investing resources in that anymore, other than making sure I have an understanding of the right language, right? Do I know the right terms? Do I know what the capabilities are? Can I manage a project to completion? That's great, but I'm not going to devote my time to learning how to actually program in it. The other one is the nice-to-have skills. And in this, I would include not just technical skills, not just business skills, but even outside of work, right? Because if you're going to be really effective in your workplace, you're going to be an effective, kind of stable human being. Right, and you're going to be fulfilled. Don't rule out things like, you know what, I'd like to take a public speaking class, or I'd like to learn an instrument, right? How many people here are musicians? You know, I'm not. And I always say, wow, it's really mind expanding and it's good for you. And so in your list of what opportunities you have or what opportunities your team has, go ahead and identify things that aren't just like, I'm going to learn how to manage FileMaker server. Like open it up and really think about what you could do. The other thing I think is really important is to focus on your strengths. I read a book a long time ago that kind of stuck with me, and the guy said, you know what, if you are not good at something, you can work really hard, right? You can take classes, you can work really hard, and then you can be mediocre. Or, if you're pretty good at something, most likely you're interested in it. Most likely you're motivated by it. And so if you invest in that particular skill set, you could be great. So what do you want to be great or do you want to be mediocre? What's more fulfilling? What's going to be satisfying? I know that sounds kind of silly the way I positioned it, but I see people doing this all the time. Like, oh, I want to be better at sales, so I'm going to work on this. Well, they hate it. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have a base level of skills, right? There's some things you need to know just as part of your portfolio of what skill set you have. But if there's things you're better at, if there's things you like better, if your team has things they're good at, go ahead and help people specialize. Let everybody know. Everybody knows how to install FileMaker server, but have somebody else who really gets the Windows system, the operating system, have them dig into it. Have them figure out be the experts there, and you can rely on them. So focus on your strengths. The next thing, and I think this one is really interesting, especially as it's played out in my career, is really to define a measure of success. So you set this goal, and some of them are easy to see when you achieve. I took the certification test and I passed. But there's other goals, and people will identify it, and there's no start and there's no end point. And then there's no way of measuring how that's going to be achieved. Now, you typically hear this in a corporate setting. How am I going to know when you achieved your goal so that I can verify it? That's important, and you want to be able to check that off and say, this person achieved this goal. But more importantly, as you're deciding where to prioritize your time, if you can't measure the success of a particular goal, is that a goal you should be working on? How do I know if I got to where I want to go? And let me give you a couple example metrics. You know, the easy one, certification. Maybe you take a class and you get a degree or a certificate from it. With specific skills, it's easy to break down, okay, you did a couple videos on server install, you did one on your own. Now let's say you have 2 successful server installs. Check it off, it's complete, you've achieved it. Other kinds of goals could be an increase in billable hours. Now I work a lot with junior developers, and a lot of times they don't have enough skills to, we're swamped, but there's only this little subset of work they can do. So you want to give them some skills so that they can participate more fully. That's a measurable goal. They used to only be able to get them 10 hours a week. Now they're doing 20 hours a week. This is a way to measure it. And that can work in-house as well if you're saying, gosh, all these projects are on my plate because this person isn't capable to taking anything off of it for me. Another one, this is interesting, it sounds a little counterintuitive because I first said, oh, you increase your billable hours, and then the next one I'm going to say, oh, it takes you less time. But that's the reality. Like, there are some tasks that you want to be able to say, hey, this person has a less reliance on me for their questions. They aren't coming to me as much to figure things out. It takes them less time. I estimated for them 4 hours, and look at that, they did it in 3. So there's ways to measure that you're achieving your goals and you're making progress. And especially if you're managing a team, you've got to pay attention to these metrics. It's really easy to get focused on your own work and like, well, the work is getting done, and then you finally look at it and you're like, man, that person took 3 months to do it. Here's when it comes up the most. Do you ever bring somebody new in and they do something in a week that you've had on somebody else's plate for like 2 months? If you keep on top of it, you can avoid those mistakes or those losses. The other one I think is really important, this kind of relates to just the overall value of learning, is a certain confidence in your services. If I'm educated on something, I feel more comfortable in a sales situation. I feel more comfortable talking to my client. I feel more comfortable offering options that I know I can either do or I understand or my team does. So all of these metrics can be checked off to just say, this is a confidence builder. That's fine. This helps me with aligning all my skills. The next one I think is important is to just take stock of what your learning style is. A lot of people forget to do this, and it'll take you 3 minutes. By the time you're done reading the slide, you know the answer to it. For me, I think I learn best like working with other people. It's really nice to have somebody look over your shoulder. If I get stuck, I'll call somebody and say, how do you do it? And they point me in the right direction. A lot of people say, well, I work alone, I don't have that opportunity. Well, sure you do. There might be a user group. There's all these forums that you can write to and interact with people. And then one of the things I did early in my career is I just made it a point. I would set aside a certain amount of budget to hire somebody as a coach. Back in the day, I would call Bob Bowers and I'd be like, I have this project. I want to learn how to do it. It's due in 3 weeks. Will you come sit with me and show me how to do it? Not do it for me, but will you show me how to do this? And some of the stuff I learned then by just watching another developer. It's totally worth the money, but watching another developer's approach is a really fast way to learn, and it stays with you. You can do that here, you can do that at the Visionary Bar, and there's plenty of, a lot of the Platinum Partners do coaching. The other one is mentoring. Like, again, if any of you guys are managing other developers, Women of FileMaker put this mentoring program together. It's for men or women. It's just a way to check in and have somebody else review your code. So that can be a really powerful way to learn. The other thing I have my juniors do is I kind of, because I have control over them because they're getting a grade, I'll say, okay, I need you to listen to 1 podcast a week. I need you to look at these 3 videos, just so they get exposed to it. Because they might find out that, it's really nice for me to just listen to a podcast in the car. Some people, that's not useful at all. But if you can set up a plan that says, okay, let's make sure I've tried all these things, and again, talk to your team, what way do you learn best? I do all these videos, learning videos. I can't stand videos. I always want to skip ahead to the part I'm interested in. So I like to have a book. I like to be able to Google it. I like to be able to just get to the part that I want. If you recognize that, you can create a more effective learning plan for your team, for your employees, for yourself. So create a resource catalog. I think, and again, I go back to, in the early days, there wasn't that much, right? Now there's a ton of stuff out there, but maybe not all of it is useful. So I just threw down a few things on here, but of the types of resources and the types of learning that you do, go ahead and identify a whole list of things so everybody knows it's there. Another thing I make people do is, okay, you have, my tutor, you have to log into FM forums and I want you to post a question and see what happens, right? And they're always just shocked. They're like, wow, I got a response in like 12 minutes. And that's, it's important to just do it once and try it. See if that's useful for you. If you don't already have a network of people that you can pick up the phone and call, you can find a network there. make sure you have that whole catalog of resources that people have access to, and then you figure out which ones are most useful to you. Time for the action plan. So again, now we've kind of thought a little bit, what's important to me, what do I need to focus on, what are my best ways of achieving those goals. Now we have to come up with an action plan, and you just got to write it down. Who, what, when, where, why, and write it down is because we want to hold ourselves accountable. A couple of particulars about your plan. I like to, and this is just like in project management, just because it's going to take me 40 hours to program it doesn't mean it's going to be done Friday. It's not 5 days, it's 40 hours, and I can probably do 2 hours of training a week, so that's how far it's going to spread out. Is that going to be effective? No, I've got to make more time. So define how many hours this particular task is going to take. I'll give you an example. Certification's really hard for me. I told you I'm not programming very much these days. You know, and a lot of those questions, I'll just Google it or I'll call somebody else, but when you're taking the test, you've got to have it at the top of your head. So for me, I know that I either need 2 full days to study, or I need 2 weeks where I spend an hour every night practicing. Define that, know that about yourself, and then block out the time. You want to put in there what's the cost and what resources, materials do I need to achieve that goal. Now you've got to make room for learning. Can I just check, am I right that this is one of the biggest problems? There's all kinds of things you want to learn, but you just can't find the time for it? Okay. Because we can talk about, there's all kinds of resources you can get, and we can have plenty of QA afterwards too. There's plenty of resources you can get to help you with the learning, but I think one of the biggest ones is deciding what you're going to do and then making time for it. So a couple ways, we got to prioritize, we got to optimize, you've got to delegate, and you've got to schedule it. So let me dig into a couple of those. Find the time. Has anybody ever said to you, oh, if you really want it, you'll find the time? And I like to say, yeah, but you don't know my life. You know, I'm running a business, and I have 2 little kids, and I volunteer, and I do all this stuff, and I don't have any time, right? And I used to, I haven't exercised in 8 years, and so I was like, okay, I would exercise, but I just don't have time. I can't go to the gym. And the reason I put this picture up is now I moved into the suburbs, and there's this lovely trail, and I like to cross-country ski. So, well, how am I ever going to find that? Well, it turns out, when I wake up, I started paying attention to my habits, and I wake up at 6 every day, and I read the news, and I look at Facebook, and I check my email till about 6:45, and then I get ready. Well, guess what? If I chose to get out of bed and I put the phone down, I got 45 minutes. I figured that out about 6 months ago. I didn't start doing it until a month ago. You have to be motivated, but you can find the time if it becomes a priority. And that kind of goes back to the same thing about focusing on your strengths, focusing on things that motivate you. If you've got a team and you want somebody to learn something that they're not interested in, how much time are they going to put into it? They're only going to put the time you allocate on the clock to do it. But if it's something they're excited about, they're going to make time in their own schedule because they're motivated by it. And I'll say, just from working with the team, working with partners, coaching people, the most successful projects are when you're really self-motivated. And we've got plenty to be excited about, right? It's not like we have boring jobs. A couple things, these are tools to optimize your efficiency. And I am going to post these slides. They're updated slides, so you can get these links if you want. They're both like 45 minutes, and it's a conference we put on a couple years ago. So Cris Ippolite's talking about getting in the zone. He's a FileMaker developer. He's a FileMaker trainer. He's also like a fantasy football expert. He does work for the NFL. So in the fall, his life is crazy. And he was talking about, how do I juggle all this? And how do I even get in the headspace, right? How do you switch from this part of what I do to this part of what I do to this part of what I do? He did a whole research study. He basically did all this research about different methods to get yourself to be very efficient and get in the zone. And then the other one, we had Casey Mulqueen speak. He's written a whole bunch of books on this concept of agility. Learning agility, it's adaptability. We talk a lot as developers like how difficult it is when you're working on one thing and then you have to switch gears. Right? Some people need kind of dedicated swaths of time. Some people need to juggle. So he talks a lot about what that agility is and what your learning style is and how you can optimize that. They're really interesting, and just you'll walk away with a couple of ideas that I've continued to find effective. There was another study just about how when you're really busy, you can just crank out a ton of work, and then all of a sudden something slows down and you're like, wow, that thing should have took me 2 hours and it took me 20. Right? And so it talks about like getting yourself past that. Delegating. How many people are really good at delegating? you know, there's some people have a good natural skill for it. I don't. It's challenging for me, and a lot of people will say, oh yeah, that's because you're a control freak. Well, I don't think that's it. I think it's more a lot of times I can't figure out a way to explain it to somebody else that's going to take me less time than to do it myself. Or again, and I think you'll relate to this, like as a developer, a lot of times I know where I want to be, but I kind of have to play around to get to where I want to go. And so somebody will say, well, come on, Molly, what do you want me to do? And I don't really know, right? I don't know until I start doing it. And so one of the ways I've practiced really hard to get past that, well, there's two things. One is there's a reluctance to hand something off until you have the time to properly educate the person on what's going to happen. I kind of threw that away. I said, you know what? I'm not going to get to this for 2 weeks, no matter what. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it to Susie, and I'm going to tell her what the problem is, and in 2 weeks, let's see if she can come up with the solution, you know, without a ton of hand-holding from me. And you don't want to do it with somebody who's really junior so that they feel like they're failing. You don't want to set somebody up that they just are frustrated. But if you're working with somebody that you can articulate the problem and give them a couple directions and say, let's just see how far you get, they're going to get something done. And if they don't, you wouldn't have touched it for 2 weeks anyway. Try to figure that out in terms of assigning the problem. What can you hand off? Another thing I have problems with is delegating things that are small. Yeah, I'll just do it myself, you know. I've got a client, I literally have like 2 clients left that maybe it's 20 or 30 hours a year. So when they pop up, rather than train somebody else on it and have them handle it, I'll just figure it out. And then I don't have to give them the background, and I feel like I'm being efficient. But the reality is I'm not, because guess what? I don't have, when that person needs me in 1 week, I don't usually have 5 hours to carve out to do that one thing they need. I've been very deliberate in recent years to say, okay, for this small client, I'm going to make sure somebody else is trained, and yep, it might take them a little longer than it'll take me, but I've got to have that off my plate so I can pursue all these other things. So I'm being kind of ruthless about what tasks I can delegate, and then spending the time, you know, even if it's just a little bit of a time, to make sure somebody else is able to cover those. The other one I think is really effective is to train your clients to support their own system, right? Assuming they want to. A lot of times people say, well, but that's a lot of our business is support. Your business isn't support, right? You don't want to get calls when they're stuck or they don't know what they're doing or they feel like your system isn't intuitive. You want them to call you when they're like, hey, I thought of something else that we want to do that would make it even better. So if you train them to feel comfortable supporting their own system, they're getting an answer quicker, they're empowered to use your system, and then they have the opportunity. You're not going to lose the work, and probably you don't want those, I can't log in anyway. A lot of times I'll say, gosh, I don't think I gave this client enough training. I need to make sure that I give them some base level. And I can see some people laughing out there because they understand. Hire subcontractors. How many people just feel like you're all alone and you just do have to do it all by yourself? You don't. Here's the good news. Here's the good news, and it's a tough leap to make initially. There are lots of people who are eager for subcontract work. And again, you got to figure out how you can delegate it and what that would look like. But if you can find somebody to subcontract to, it can give you some more relief so that you can focus on these higher level tasks that you should be pursuing. Go to Kalos Consulting. Years ago, I was doing some recruiting, and then that was just getting in the way of, again, pick your focus. What do you have time for? What are you going to work on? So I teamed up with Kalos Consulting. They've got a booth. They've got like 50 people who are registered contractors who just work hourly. They also place full-time people, but check with them. Think about it. You know, if there was something you could hand off, wouldn't that be nice? Or even if you are solo and you would like someone to be able to back you up, like if you were to take a vacation or something, that's an option for you. I've also done a lot of partnering with people where I say, hey, you know, the guys in Chicago, I'll be like, all right, I'm going to be gone. Could you just, if anything happens with this person, can you just calm them down? You know, at least make them feel like somebody's there if there's an emergency. And that's useful too. I finally stopped wasting time on bookkeeping. You know, I've always had an accountant, but the accountant, you still have to prepare the data to give to the accountant, and you still have to keep track of the timesheets, and you still have to, you know, pay taxes. And so, you know, what's that, 4 hours a month? Which I would say, that's not too much, and I can just do that on Saturday or whatever. Well, guess what? My bookkeeper charges $35 an hour. My rate's a little higher than that. How about I get that off my plate, and that gives me room? And some of those things are hard to do, like, you know, you kind of want to watch the money and you want to watch all this. But if you're hiring a professional, like people do with us, it's for a reason. Think about that and be a little bit ruthless about your schedule and what you could get off your plate. You know, you got to schedule time for it. I have to put it on my calendar. If it's not on my calendar, something else will get in the way. So whatever your goals are, you're going to put it on your calendar, you're going to check in, you're going to do an update on it. If you have a team, you're going to have the people that work for you say, you know what, Friday morning is going to be my time to work on this goal, and you're going to have them write an email to say what they achieved that day. You don't have to follow up on it. You can put it in their plate and say, all right, how'd you do on that? How are you coming along? If you're stuck, fine, but tell me where you're at so that you keep that momentum going. Now, who am I accountable to? Again, I've been solo for a long time. I've been my own boss since I was 25 years old, and at various times, I'm better at it than others. Sometimes I can just put it on the calendar and say, I'm going to meet it by this date. Sometimes I need deadlines. A lot of times for my professional development, I say, all right, I'm going to speak at DevCon. Right? Because then I've got a deadline and I've got to perform and I've got to, you know, I've got to be able to stand in front of you guys and do this. So there's different ways to put deadlines for yourself in, but I also, in recent years, I've joined like a mastermind group, and what I do is I tell them what my goal is and then they hold me accountable. And that is surprisingly effective. Because when you tell yourself someone and you don't tell anybody else, it's pretty easy to let yourself off the hook. But if you've told a group of 5 or 6 people that you're going to do this by this deadline, like I said this year, I was like, all right, I haven't updated my website in 7 years and it has some crazy pictures of work I'm not even doing anymore. But when I told them, all right, I'm going to have it done by DevCon, somehow it gets done because you get a little more pressure. You also need to know when to switch gears. Let's say you picked a goal. Let's say you've been spending time on it. Let's say you've invested a lot of time in it and it's just not working. I put this up, this elusive moose, right? A couple of years ago, Jason Mundock and I were like, we got this great idea. We're going to do a FileMaker business resource for FileMaker developers. And we held 2 conferences. We had a website, and we had great speakers, and we had really great content. And you know what? After 2 years, we couldn't even break even on it. And on the one hand, it was interesting. The guy in today's keynote, when he was talking about how we articulate things as failure, when it's not really failure, it's just you tried something new. And it was a nice way to frame that because I was like, you know what? All right, we had to stop doing this. We didn't have the time for it. But in the meantime, I learned a lot about social media. I did a podcast. I met all these great people that came to my conference. So even though it was fun and it was inspiring, I just had to say I'm done with that, right? And so you have to know when to, whether it's a service you're offering, whether it's a service you think you're trying to offer, and sometimes it's really hard because you've invested a lot in it. I've seen people who've invested a lot in a particular technology say, you know what, this isn't getting me where I need to go, so I got to switch gears. Know when to switch gears, know when that is, and be evaluating that. So we're going to set 3 goals. This is the way I like to categorize goals. One's required. I got to be certified. You have a new employee, they don't know how to use FileMaker Go. They just haven't figured it out yet. There's some required things that you just have to have, and you mark it down, and you set a deadline, and you get it done. The other one, and actually I'll do some examples, so certification. So let's say you've got a required goal. What are some things you can do to make sure, and now I'm going to switch to the team, right? Because you can self-motivate to get certified. But with your team, let's say you hired somebody new, and you really want them to be certified, right? They're new to FileMaker. They need to have kind of that breadth of experience that they're exposed to in preparing for the test. A lot of places for a new hire, the first-time certification, they'll offer a bonus. And I've talked to a lot, and it's pretty significant to their salary, right? You get a one-time bump in salary. And the reason for that is like, if they're going to work on, then they're going to study on the weekend or in the evenings, and they're going to get closer to that goal, and that's worth it for you. If you're working on your 7th certification, you're not going to get a $5,000 salary bump every time you get certified. But what can you do for your people to make sure they're staying current? I've seen a lot of people say, you know what, we'll go ahead and we'll dedicate a certain amount of time for like group training, right? We'll have Friday lunch study groups, or help facilitate that so that there is some component where people are studying together and have dedicated time. But you could also do something like, I know a couple places do, hey, after you're certified, you get a day off, right? You don't get like 3 days off to study in advance, but if you pass, you can get a day off, and that's a good bonus and a good incentive. And like from personal experience, I don't love studying for certification. It's not a highly motivating thing, so you might need to throw a little carrot out there. The goal that I like the best are the inspired goals. I really want to work for this organization. And guess what they need? They need a contact database. right? That's super boring. If part of your job is to do a contact database or get another purchase order system, it's not as exciting, it's not as rewarding. But if you have somebody on your team that's really interested, I work for my adoption agency, and you know what, I want to see them thrive and I want to see them do better. I'm going to make some time for that, and I'm going to be inspired by that. So you can have a goal to maybe, lead a project of your choice. I just noted 2 sessions that I'm excited about. Thursday at 9 is the nonprofit case studies, and that's actually, it's Maka at Soliant is running the philanthropy group. The types of projects they're doing, it's rewarding on a much different level. Now they might be technically challenging, but usually if it's something that you pick or you're excited about or you're invested in a different way, you're going to learn that technology or you're going to deliver that skill. And then the next generation of FileMaker developers, I think that also talks about like inspiring people to get really immersed in the technology. So I think those will be good. The next one is a challenge. And my favorite way to learn is when I'm getting paid for it. Does anybody else like that? Right? So a lot of times, if there's a new project and there's an opportunity for me to learn a new skill, I know it's going to take me longer, right? Whatever I bid on it, I know it's going to take me longer, but I'm going to take that on because it pushes me with a deadline, with a client, with accountability to learn a new skill. So I love those. And one of the challenges, so I just have an example for you. One of my big projects is with Chicago Public Schools. And they have, there's thousands of students and there's a selective enrollment process. There's a FileMaker database that manages all these complex selections. Well, Chicago Public Schools decided, we'll have a different web vendor do the front end of this system, and we'll have that vendor be responsible for publishing the results. Well, it's really complicated. I mean, we've been doing this for 10 years, and there's a lot of steps and a lot of accountability and a lot of risk. Guess what? That other vendor couldn't figure it out. They called us with 10 weeks till the results were supposed to be posted on our website. And they said, all right, you know what, these guys are not going to make it. Could you do it? And here's the constraints. You already have the data, that's fine. But can you post that data to a website that can handle 5,000 concurrent users? So I said yes, having no idea if it was even technically possible, mostly because I was feeling really competitive with that other vendor and I wanted to show them that we could do it. And it wasn't totally crazy because I figured, well, worst case scenario, I'll print a whole bunch of PDFs and we'll achieve the goal, right? So I called Jesse Barnum, he's 360 Works, and I said, hey, Jesse, is this possible? And he's like, yeah, Sam's been doing work with DynamoDB, which is Amazon's database. It can scale to any, to any amount of users, no problem. And we could probably use mirror sync with FileMaker, and I think I could figure it out. And I was like, okay, wait, so we can do it? He's like, yeah, we can do it. I just have to teach myself DynamoDB. And I was like, fine, 10 weeks, you've never done it before, I've never tried it before, let's give it a shot. It sounds silly, but it was one of those that Jesse's like, yeah, I really want to learn this technology, and it's an opportunity to do it. Like, I'm going to dig into it. We spent a lot of time on it. It was a successful delivery. It was obviously, I'm proud of it because it's such crazy numbers, right? But if you give yourself a challenge, and sometimes if it is with a particular client or if you're going to try something new, you can't always get away with it. We definitely ate a lot of hours on that, but it was worth it because we wanted to achieve that goal. And having a lot of extra pressure can really help you learn fast too sometimes. Are you all thinking about what your goals are? Everybody's got a couple goals. Once you have a couple goals, spend a little time evaluating each opportunity. Because especially by the end of this week, you're going to have 10 new things that you want to learn. Are you going to be able to learn all 10 things right away? Probably not. The efforts that I go through, I say, all right, what's the level of effort? Is this something that, that certification? Yeah, you got to set aside 2 days and I can do it. What's the career relevance? It's really high. What's the leverage? If I do this, can I leverage it to my team? Can I share that knowledge with my clients? Is that useful? Is that and I just go high, medium, low on all of these. Chance of mastery, right? When I decided I wanted to play the fiddle, my chance of mastery was incredibly low, and that was another goal that I've abandoned. But, you look at it and you say, I'm going to give it a try, and this one is high, and then put a time and a cost in there. I throw up all my goals, because of course I'm going to make a FileMaker database to do it. And then I'm going to make a list. And all these, who was it this morning that was saying, they're all data points, right? You don't necessarily have to, it's not going to be, if everything is high, you're not necessarily going to do it. You still have other factors that are going to come into it. But I really, we're analytical people. Prioritize those goals. Give yourself a fresh look at, is this going to matter? And especially if you have a team. You might have somebody come to you and have a really passionate ploy for while they want to learn some particular technology that has nothing to do with your business. And my first instinct would be like, no, why would you do that? It's not going to help us at all. But it might be that they can make a case that it's going to translate elsewhere. It might be that they're so excited about it, they're willing to put time in outside of it. I mean, if you look around, people have places to go. You want to find ways to retain your people and your good talent. If there's an opportunity that doesn't seem quite right to you, you can put it in a metric like this so you can help make a better informed decision, right? You don't have to just do an immediate no, that's not relevant, or yes to everything, because you want to be the good guy and you want to say yes to everything. You can prioritize it. I would challenge you by the end of the week to come up with 3 goals that you're going to achieve by next DevCon. If you can do them faster, great, then add another goal. You could do 3 things in the next year, and you could pick them from what you're working on here, and you can dedicate the resources for it. And then the other thing, besides just measuring your success, it's important to celebrate it too. A lot of times we just go, and you never recognize what you've built and what you've achieved. And so it's hard to do that for yourself, right? What are you going to have a little party for yourself? But if you don't do it for your employees or your teammates, that's a real slap in the face, and they will recognize it. If you're measuring, another really good thing there is, and it's interesting, again, most of us FileMaker developers, we're motivated by our own success. And I don't know a lot of people that need a lot of pats on the back, but it does matter. It does matter to say, hey, good job, let me recognize it, and let's see what your next goal can be. I do have session updates. I updated these slides. I put a couple of those links in there. If you fill out your evaluations, that would be great. I have time, if anyone has questions, if you don't mind coming up to the microphone, since I guess this is being recorded. Any questions?
Well, I'm like you, have a hard time delegating out things because it seems like it takes more time to explain and set that expectation, and then you have to go back and follow up and make sure their work was done the way you would have done it.
Right.
And so you mentioned that you had a team that you're going to delegate this out to your other people to do. So are you going to create an interruption for them and their flow to then have this inserted somewhere else? So a lot of this, I think, gets to be time management and managing priorities, and then setting a good example for your team. So
yeah, that's the complexity there is you said, okay, well, I'm going to delegate somebody else to monitor this task. So a couple things, and there's lots of different ways to solve this, right? So for me, what I have found after all these years is I work best with highly skilled, even though I train junior developers, I don't typically hire them, because I need to work with somebody who knows more than I do, and I can say, here you go, and guess what, they're expensive, and it's totally worth it to me. So it's worth it to me because I don't have to check their work. I'm terrible at that, right? I really am, and if you finally just say, you know what, it's really hard for me to break my stride and go back and QA their work. I want to give it to somebody who I know is going to knock it out of the park and do it well. They might not do it like I do, but because they're at the same level or higher than I am, I can trust that the result is where it needs to be. So that's one choice, but it does, in many cases, that limits your profitability if you're hiring an expensive resource. So in other cases, I have worked with a team, and again, because I'm better at delegating the question, there's a technical lead in between, and that has to, you're right, you have to plan for that. You can't just say, hey, here you go, now you're responsible for taking care of the junior developer. It has to be part of their responsibilities, and it has to be kind of agreed upon to say, all right, your new role is that you're also going to have some mentorship time to manage this and test it. I don't think it's wrong, let's say you're the business owner, for you not to be the one QAing everything, right? That's definitely a skill that you can pass down. And there's lots of different ways to achieve this, and there's lots of different models to handle this. A lot of times you can't find the high-level developers. They're busy. And even though they're expensive, but they're already too busy. So I have had to work with more junior. And then I just have to really, those are the times when I have to work on my patience. and I'll tell, it's the other thing, be honest if you know yourself. I'll tell my juniors, I say, listen, you got to ask me questions, and it's okay if you ask me more than once. And I might be a little short with you, but I'm not mad at you, I'm just busy. Sorry, I forgot to fix my tone, but you can set people up for that and say, the back and forth you need, we need to get you a mentor, we need to get you other resources so you can be better at this. Any other questions?
Could you talk some more about the ways you hold yourself accountable for personal goals? I heard about mastery program or something.
Oh yeah. Right, so talk about different ways to hold yourself accountable, because this is tough. It's easy for us to be, a lot of people ask me, they're like, wow, how are you so self-motivated? But if you think about the work you do, isn't stuff just coming at you all the time? I feel like we don't have a ton of proactive work at a certain point. We're just reacting to the demands of our client. That's one thing that works for me, is to have other people holding me accountable, whether it's my client. I joined what's called a mastermind group. Is anybody else in a mastermind group? You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so it's basically, you can Google it, like it's a group of, you could find 6 or 7 people here at DevCon and say, hey, do you want to meet once a month? There's a particular format. We just go, 3 people are on the hot seat, they talk about what their goals are, and then the other 3 people just check in, and it's their turn the next month. A month goes really fast. You'd be surprised. But it's interesting how it builds up. So mastermind group, or I've got a couple other groups that are similar that, again, are just kind of check-in groups. So that's been really effective for me, just, again, in terms of goal setting, having other people hold me accountable, and even just kind of listen to what other people's goals are, right? Because if you're working in a vacuum, it's hard to keep track of that. A couple other things for accountability. I definitely do. I'll do this on a micro level too. I'll wake up in the morning and I say 3 things I have to get done, right? That I have to get these done today. I can't, and it can be really small, like I got to get that invoice out, or I got to do this or that. So I have 3 things I have to get done, 3 things I should get done, and 3 things I could get done. And the reason is because it's so easy to get knocked off your game with phone calls or a different project, or even sidelining on your own adventure, following something shiny. So I do start every day with that, saying here are the 3 things that I have to get done. I set rewards for, I really like sushi, right? So I'll just say, like, okay, when I complete this, we'll do some kind of reward. And it might sound a little, so you kind of got to trick yourself sometimes. All right, well, thanks everybody for listening. I hope that's a little bit helpful. We are in an inspiring place with plenty of people to network with and tons of resources. And the biggest challenge, I think, is deciding which of the many opportunities you want to go after, and then deciding how to make it happen. So good luck, and if you need me to hold you accountable, you can email me. All right. Thank you.